Next up, we're happy to welcome the CEO of Glycorex Transplantation, Pontus Nobréus. Welcome, Pontus.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today to introduce Glycorex Transplantation. In the US and Europe, more than 120,000 people are waiting for a new kidney. And in the US, 20 persons a day is dying waiting for a new kidney. Besides all the medical challenges and the suffering for those people, it of course also creates a lot of cost for society in terms of dialysis treatment and other treatments. Glycorex is developing products that can safely and effectively contribute to reducing those waiting lines. And today I will talk about what we do in the transplantation area and how we can bring our technology into other segments as well. But let's start with the big picture. Chronic kidney diseases is a huge global problem. It's affecting 850 million people around the globe. And it's actually predicted to be the 5th leading cause of death by 2040. And by 2030, it's expected to be more than 5 million people receiving some sort of kidney therapy. And by that I mean either going through dialysis or a transplantation. Not only does this affect the individual, but it has also a huge impact on the society. As an example, in the US, the public healthcare provider Medicare spends about 7% of its annual budget on this 1% of the population affected. And the same goes for many, many countries around the world. So there is actually a big incentive to try to do as many kidney transplantations as possible. Because not only does it provide better quality of life for the person and also socio-economic benefit, but also when you get a new kidney, you have a longer lifetime compared being on dialysis. But of course there are some challenges when you do kidney transplantation. I already mentioned the gap between supply and demand. And there is another thing that we need to consider when we do transplantation, and that is the blood group compatibility. You can see on this slide in the middle, as you probably know, there are 4 different blood groups. And if you have the same blood group as the donor and the receiver, it's not a problem. But if not, you can have a rejection. So you have to consider that as well. If you do living donor kidney transplantation, there are also other ways to go around that, and that is by having kidney pad donation program. But that's also a little bit of challenge in many countries, because as an example, in some countries you run those programs maybe 3 times a year. You search in databases and you try to do this match. So if you don't have a match, you have to wait another 4 months. So that's not effective. And this is something that Glycorex is addressing. We have a product called Glycosorb ABO that can enable blood group incompatible transplantation. How does it work then? Well, if you consider the blood plasma in a normal person, you have about 3 liters of plasma. And in that plasma, you have a small amount of antibodies. It's about 1%. And what we do with our product is that we specifically remove those antibodies from the blood plasma. Without introducing any foreign material, we do it outside the body, and thereafter you can safely and effectively go ahead and do the transplantation even though you don't have matching blood groups. So how does it work then? Well, this is a product. It's called an immunoadsorption column. It's based on active carbohydrates. It's our own developed technology. And the nice thing with this medtech device is that it fits into standard plasma separation machines in the hospital. So there is actually no need for any extra equipment, no extra investment. A question I often get is, who is treated? Well, that's a very good question, and the answer is it's the patient that is receiving the kidney. And you are treated for about an hour, depending on the weight, and you can do that a couple of times. After each treatment, you measure the level of the antibodies to make sure that you have sufficient low levels of antibodies to be able to do the transplantation. So it's a very safe and easy method to prepare a patient for a blood group incompatible transplantation. And we have done this actually for 20 years. The first blood group incompatible transplantation with Glycosorb was done in 2001 in Huddinge sjukhus. It was an 18-year-old woman who had been on dialysis since the age of 8 years. So suddenly, in a few hours, she got a new life. Since then, our technology and product has been used in more than 5,000 transplantations. And we have been focusing mainly on kidney transplantations and from living donors. But our technology has also been used successfully for heart transplant, liver transplant, and lung transplants. So the question is, how is the landscape in general around the world when it comes to transplantations? On this slide, you can have an overview of the development of the number of transplantations. And in 2019, there were more than 150,000 transplantations performed. And the majority of those were in the kidney area. And if you look in the kidney area, you can divide it into two pieces. One is kidneys from living donors, and one is from deceased donors. And the deceased donor area is a little bit bigger than the living donor area. And it has been a tradition that it has been a little bit of resistance to take a kidney from a healthy person. Even though we know that the outcome is better when you take a kidney from a healthy person versus from a deceased person. But that is often governed by national policies and regulations. But what has happened in the past years is that there has been a lot of lobbying going on to increase the number of living donor transplantations, given those long waiting times. If we break this down into geographies, we can see that the largest market for living donor kidney transplantation is by far India. And this is very interesting. In India, it's performed twice as many living donor kidney transplantations than in Europe as a whole. The US is also a large market, followed by Turkey and Mexico. And it's very positive that Glycorex is actually represented in 3 of the 4 largest living donor kidney transplantation markets. And we have ongoing plans for market introduction in the US. We have broken down those numbers into monetary terms. We have identified the market potential, and now we're talking about the living donor kidney transplantation market, which is just a sub-segment of the general transplantation market. And we have concluded that this market for our product that we have been using for 20 years is actually 600 million Swedish kronor. And the question is, how have we addressed this potential? Well, our main region is Europe. We have 80% of our sales in Europe. We have a strong market in Germany, our largest market. We have strong presence in Scandinavia and several other European countries. But still, we have more to do there. And our strategy in Europe has been so far to work with direct sales. And we do that for several reasons. 1, we get a higher margin. 2, we have better control of the sales process. And thirdly, we can increase our presence and interaction with the doctors directly. And that's get a better understanding of the business. And outside Europe, we actually work with distributors. And we are present in those, I mentioned those markets before, India, Mexico, and Turkey. India, we have been for a while. In Mexico, the first transplantation was done in 2018 with Glycosorb. And we were introduced into the reimbursement system in 2020. In Turkey, we signed a distribution agreement last year. And this partner successfully took our product to the Ministry of Health approval in February this year. And we have activities underway in Turkey to get our product into the reimbursement system. That is, of course, a little bit longer process, but we also have sales activities because we can still sell the product. And the US is also a big market, and here we have an ongoing plan how to get into that market. So that was the transplantation market. The question is, how can our technology platform be used in other areas? Well, we have a very interesting area. Sorry, I'm now mixing the slides. I just want to mention one thing before about Germany. And this is a proof of concept about how we can increase the number of transplantation using Glycosorb to a sustainable level. This illustrates that we can go up to 20% blood group incompatible transplantations by introducing Glycosorb. And I'm convinced that we can take this concept to other countries with the right conditions and make a copy and paste. So that is very promising. So now I'm going to talk about other segments that are of interest for us. And we have blood plasma, which is a very important tool for healthcare around the world. I mean, if you look at it, massive bleeding is one of the leading causes of death. And if you identify all the injuries, 30–40% are caused by massive bleeding. So there is a need for plasma, but also a need for plasma for more of general surgeries, planned surgeries, childbirth, people suffering from anemia, people undergoing cancer treatments, and so on and so forth. And here it's critical to have a good timing and availability of the plasma, having the right plasma of the right blood group available at the right place. So that puts some challenges into the blood bank business. And here, Glycosorb can help. If you remember on one of my previous slides, to the left here you can see how the matching when it comes to blood transfusion among blood group works. If you are blood group A and B, you can transfuse to all the other blood groups. But the challenge is that is only 5% of the population. So there is a limitation, and often you use AB plasma when you don't know the recipient's blood group or when you have an emergency. So what we have offered is a product based on Glycosorb ABO. It's a new version where the blood bank, in an easy way, without any extra investment, can make their own universal plasma by using just gravity and no extra equipment. This is a totally different market than the transplantation market. It's a volume market, and we estimate the market to be about 1 billion Swedish kronor a year in Europe only. We are also very interested in another area that is affecting many people, and that is autoimmune diseases. And that is a very broad area. And we have narrowed that down in our work to a disease that affects up to 1% of the population in the world, and that is rheumatoid arthritis. And unfortunately, there is no cure to this disease. Of course, it can be in different levels and can go in cycles, but the fact is that up to 10% of the patients do not respond to the treatment. And we have developed a new version of Glycosorb that we have successfully tested in biocompatibility studies, and our next step is actually to go out with a clinical study for RA patient, and if this is successful, of course we will then take it further to CE mark. I must point out here, this is a huge market, much bigger than the other markets for Glycosorb. We mean that we have a potential of 5 billion Swedish kronor in Europe only for this product. We also have some other product in the pipeline, but now we focus on the RA product. So, to summarize, our main activities this year is to continue to grow the living donor kidney transplantation business. We have still many things to do in Europe. We need to focus on those large markets, India, Mexico, Turkey, the emerging markets, we are going to work with our registration work in the US. And for the UBP product, we actually had a CE mark last year and made a pre-launch where we went out to key reference customers for them to evaluate the product. Our aim is to have scientific publications and to use that as a sort of a platform for a more broader commercialization. And finally, like I mentioned, the RA product, to get that into clinical studies, given the COVID situation, of course, if we can do that. But that's our aim for this year. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Pontus.
You're welcome.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I just have a few questions for you.
Absolutely.
I was wondering what the situation is in terms of the registration process in the US, if you could go into that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's a very good question, of course. And when you look at the registration work in general in the US, I mean, there are different pathways and different tracks and different things you need to do. And of course, one very important thing is the study work, to present data, and especially data on patients in the US is very important for FDA. And what we did before the pandemic started, we had been in contact with hospitals that had an interest in doing such a study. And now, when the situation is improving, we can continue those discussions and go further in the planning of those studies. So that's one piece. Another piece is, of course, to prepare for the actual FDA registration work, to allocate the resources and identify the resources. So that is something that we do as well. So there are some parallel tracks going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Keeping busy there.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Well, I was also wanted to ask you about the competitive landscape for Glycorex. Could you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, that is many different competitors in one way, you know, because in one way dialysis is a competition, you can actually say. But also there is used plasma exchange is also common, that you take, remember that I showed that slide with the 3 liters of plasma, that you take the whole plasma from the body and you put in completely new plasma. So that is used as well. And there are, of course, also other sort of, you know, columns that are used based on another technology. So there are, you know, in different ways, different sort of competitors, I would say, you know. Yeah.
Well, just to finish things off, I was wondering if you could tell us what milestones we should look forward to in 2021 from the company.
Yeah. I mean, what's very important for us, I think now when we have a new product, the UBP product that was CE marked last year, and we do all the commercialization work, we need to, you know, get publications, and we need to continue that work. So I think that is an important milestone. And also an important milestone is the RA clinical study, to get that going. And in addition, you know, to get going in especially, you know, these emerging markets when the pandemic situation allows that, because we have this huge potential in those markets. So these are, I would say, main things to look out for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. We definitely look forward to continue following you, and especially with this RA project, seems very interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.